Thank you guys for joining the Cleveland Browns pregame tailgate show. Just going to give a couple of minutes for everyone to go ahead and join into the stream. Go ahead and get live. How's everybody doing today? My name is Sean Stevenson. I am the host of the Cleveland Browns pregame tailgate show, and I would like to welcome you all to this special edition, which is going to be today, this Thursday. Now, typically, when you guys do see the Cleveland Browns pregame tailgate show, it is usually 2 hours before kickoff. But this week, just want to do something a little bit different. Obviously, the Browns have their last game before the bye week next week. So this was one of the things I wanted to do for this week, was just to keep it strictly football. So in terms, if you want to see a tailgate recipe, go ahead and head over to Sports Illustrated BrownsDigest. That's at www.si.com/NFL/Browns. My name is Sean Stevenson. My social media information is in the top and left right-hand corners. I am a contributing writer for Sports Illustrated BrownsDigest. I write weekly columns for the website, along with lead editor Pete Smith and Brandon Little. Again, you guys can check out the website at si.com/Browns, where we have weekly content for you guys. You can go ahead and check that out. So I just want to, again, thank you so much for coming out to the show. I'm going to go ahead and get straight into the information. As you guys know, the Cleveland Browns are currently 5-2 right now, which is huge after coming off a big victory against the Cincinnati Bengals on the road. It was their second game and final game of the season that those teams met up, and the Browns finally got back on the board in the win column after falling to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And as many of you know, Baker Mayfield made history in that game with 21 straight completions, which is huge, breaking a former record that was held by the franchise by a Hall of Fame quarterback. But again, Baker Mayfield answered a lot of questions, made sure that those doubters knew who he was, which was a huge statement for him. That game-winning throw to Donovan Peoples-Jones was an absolutely beautiful pass, and this is going to be a huge matchup for them this week in Week 8, right before they go on the bye, as they host the Las Vegas Raiders at First Injury Stadium at 1 p.m. Now, this week, I do have a special guest, Mark Bradley. He is actually someone that I used to host a sports talk radio show with back in college. He is born in California, so he's been a lifelong Raiders fan. Most of you probably know by now, the Las Vegas Raiders is now the team name, no longer the Oakland Raiders, after moving this season over to the Death Star at Allegiant Stadium. So that's a big move for them. But, you know, us being Brown fans, we don't have the opportunity to see him just yet inside that new stadium, as we'll be hosting him at First Energy Stadium. Now, again, like I said, this is going to be another big game for the Browns as they're heading into the bye week, their last home game before they kind of go in a stretch where there's a few road games and a little bit easier opponents coming out of the bye, having the Texans and the Eagles as well, as well as the Jaguars. But again, it's very important for the Browns to come into this week, get a big win, and continue to show growth. You know, obviously last week, Myles Garrett, who's been an absolute game wrecker, had another big game, another sack, and really just leaving his impact and his imprint on the game, which has been huge. We all know that the Browns defense has struggled overall this season, and they're still looking for some other players to step up outside of Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. And this could be another opportunity for them to do so. Also, with the trade deadline coming up next Tuesday, this might be an opportunity for the Browns to continue within talks with teams, potentially get themselves a safety. We've obviously seen there's been some struggles with Andrew Sendejo, Carl Joseph. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury over the past few weeks. He's looking somewhat healthy as he hasn't been on the injury report so far this week. So hopefully we were able to get him back, who was actually a former Raider before joining the squad. So this will be his revenge game after playing against the Raiders this Sunday, if he's healthy enough with that hamstring. But some potential trade suitors might be the Minnesota Vikings looking at Anthony Harris. Some of you may have heard about the trade rumor of them potentially getting Adam Thielen. There's not really much footing when it comes down to that trade rumor. But again, expect the Browns to at least be talking to other teams and potentially be trade suitors before the deadline. And I wouldn't necessarily see them trading for a receiver. Obviously, most of you know that Odell Beckham Jr. has a torn ACL, and he's going to be out for the rest of the season. So obviously, they're going to be looking for receivers like Rashard Higgins and Donovan Peoples-Jones to step up in his absence. which is going to be very key for the success of this Browns offense, is them being able to have a valuable passing attack, which has kind of been on and off throughout the season, being that the run game is the foundation of this offense behind Baker Mayfield and head coach Kevin Stefanski. Now, looking at the defense, some positions that they may be looking to trade for is potentially somewhere along the defensive line, rather be another defensive tackle that could provide an interior pass rush, or a defensive end across from Myles Garrett. And then again, safety help is something that they may be looking for before the trade deadline over on November 3rd. Now, again, I just want to thank you guys so much for joining the show. Let me go ahead and just get quickly into this injury report. Now, this is going to be a little bit more speculative when it comes to the injury report this week, seeing by the fact that the final injury report hasn't came out. But being a Browns fan and watching them on a weekly basis and just constantly looking at the injury report, you can pretty much tell most likely who's going to be playing this week. You look at Austin Hooper, who had a emergency appendectomy last Friday because of his appendix had to be removed. So he's likely not going to play this week, especially with them heading into the bye. No need to rush him back. So expect Austin Hooper to be out again this week, and then he has the bye week as well to heal up. And then also we could be looking at getting running back Nick Chubb back after the bye week, which is going to be huge. Obviously, he's been out for the past few weeks as he's been dealing with that knee injury. Another player that will look to get back healthy after that bye week next week, week 9. And also you have linebacker Jacob Phillips, who's likely going to be out as well. He's been dealing with a knee injury and hasn't practiced this week and didn't practice the last couple of weeks as well. So he's likely to be out this game. Again, with the bye week coming up, no need to rush back players in a situation that their health doesn't really dictate it. And then also you have right guard Wyatt Teller, who's still dealing with that calf strain. Kevin Stefanski this week actually said it's doubtful of his return as he's dealing with that injury. Again, just give him another week to get healthy, to get back in that starting lineup. Most likely, if he is out for the game, he'll again be replaced by right guard or right tackle offensive lineman Chris Hubbard, who stepped in for him the last couple weeks, and also the game in which he got injured. And then lastly, Myles Garrett. The reason why I put questionable is because so far this week he's been dealing with an ankle injury. Now, Kevin Stefanski has said that it is likely that he's going to play, so be on the lookout for that Myles Garrett is likely going to be, in that game, but it might be something they want to monitor in terms of his snaps. And again, just it being an ankle, depending on which one it is, when it comes off for him getting off the line, that could be something that potentially hampers his play against the Raiders. So that's definitely something you want to continue to monitor as they give the final injury report on Friday, and then heading up into the beginning of the game when they release the game date and actives, depending on the health of Myles Garrett. Looking at the Raiders, just a few players, again, speculative of who I believe will most likely be out for this game. You look at receiver Bryan Edwards, who did not play last week. He's likely going to be questionable in terms of his health. And then also cornerback Keshaun Nixon. He did not play last week either with a groin injury. He has been a limited participant, but again, groin injuries can be a big issue when it comes to these players and their health. So he's been a limited participant so far this week. And, it's probably going to be a game time decision if he decides to play or not with that groin injury. And then lastly, defensive end Arden Key. He's listed as questionable. Most likely he may be out as he hasn't practiced at all this week with a foot injury after being healthy last week. So that's definitely something to monitor. Another defensive end that they could be missing off the edge for a struggling Raiders defense. And we'll definitely, keep looking at that in terms of the injury report and what we have for them. Again, with this week, there will be no tailgate recipe. We're keeping it strictly football for this Thursday special edition of the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. If you would like to check out any of the tailgate recipes, feel free to head over to Sports Illustrated BrownsDigest. Any live game day thread that is up on the website has all the tailgate recipes of the week on there, a total of 6 so far that you guys can go ahead and check out. And then lastly, the Cleveland Browns pregame tailgate show is brought to you by Focus Clothing CLE, who is a Cleveland-based clothing company, Black-owned business as well, that you guys can check out as they do sponsor each week. We're just going to go ahead and hop straight into the commercial for them. And again, that is Focus Clothing CLE. Be sure to check them out. Now, I would like to introduce to you guys Mark Bradley, my guest for this special edition of the Cleveland Browns pregame tailgate show. Mark, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people. Let them know your social media, all that. This man is also the host of Excellent Sports Talk, a weekly sports live stream over on Facebook. Again, me and Mark actually went to school together back at San Francisco State, and we hosted a sports radio show called Settle the Score every Saturday. It was a 2-hour sports show. So we definitely have some chemistry already when it comes down to the stream. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you inviting me on the show, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys and being amongst the Browns fans. That's the Las Vegas Raiders and Cleveland Browns go at it against each other, which is usually always really good games, which is always interesting. So we're going to have to see how this Sunday plays out.
Definitely. So overall this season, can you give the people just a quick synopsis of, how the Raiders have done this season? Again, this being a Browns live stream, most of them are unfamiliar, with the Raiders so far this season.
Yeah, definitely. So basically, I guess a quick synopsis of the Las Vegas Raiders season so far. It's been up and down, actually. It's 1 week they look like a playoff team. The next week they look like the typical Raiders that we're all used to seeing. Basically, I guess a good example is these past 2 weeks. Obviously, you go into Kansas City and you beat the defending champions and stop their undefeated streak, and you play excellent defense. It seems like all three phases of the team was working really well. And then you turn around next week. Tom Brady comes into Las Vegas and just does whatever he wants to do to the Las Vegas Raiders, and it's been that type of season. You just do not know what you're going to get from the Raiders each and every week.
Gotcha. So they kind of just been lacking that consistency. And like you said, they did have a really good game against the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously giving them their first loss of the season after basically a shootout where they were able to perform well. So that's definitely something, that they want. You guys kind of need to find that consistency. Maybe this is the game where you find a little bit more even competition, with the Browns, even though they are 5-2 versus the Raiders, who are currently 3-3.
Right.
You kind of look at, who the Browns have played so far this season, and really their wins. Pretty much the best competition that they've beat thus far is the Indianapolis Colts, and they're around that same skill level as the Raiders. So, maybe this is a good matchup, for these teams to really find out who they are and, and where they're placed. Because we both know the Browns and Raiders, they were both in a situation last year where they're in the playoff picture pretty much until about week 16, week 17. Yeah. And they've kind of been around that same range of, can they make that 7 seed having that extra playoff spot this year? So that's definitely something, that they'll, look to finally get to at this point.
Right. And that's a big thing. This game could have really big playoff implications if it does get down to that point, like you said, with the extra playoff seeding. So this could be a big game early. So you never know how it might play out.
Definitely. So just go ahead and can you really just talk about the type of offensive scheme that the Raiders like to run in terms of, obviously they have Josh Jacobs and Derek Carr. Derek Carr is still that questions of, is he the answer for the franchise? What can he provide on a consistent weekly basis? And then obviously Josh Jacobs, he's kind of been going through that sophomore slump a little bit. How has he done so far this season?
Yeah, that's a big that you hit the nail right on the head. It's a big offense. It's a sophomore slump that is happening, and he has playing some pretty decent defenses this year, and also like you talked about with the consistency. Offensive line for the Las Vegas Raiders has not been consistent this whole year, especially with injuries. And of course, last week the whole issue with the whole offensive lineman couldn't practice because of Trent Brown and the rest of the offensive linemen of the Raiders hanging out, which really hurt them against a really strong defense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And they showed that last week, putting Josh Jacobs basically in the box to where the Raiders had to throw the ball majority of the time. So it's been like I said, up and down with the offense, and it kind of starts with the offensive line, and if they play well, then the offense works through them, because that's one of their strong suits in Las Vegas is the offensive line. So it all depends on how well they play.
Now, has there been an update when it comes down to Trent Brown? I did notice that he did test positive for COVID. Is he still going through that testing? Has there been a time frame of potentially when he may return, or is it possible that he may play this week?
From what I heard, he's still is still in the protocol for the COVID-19. And from what I hear, that he's not going to play this week. I could be wrong, but as of right now, he is not on. He is not playing. And Sam Young will be his backup, who was completely beat up in the last game. I mean, It was so bad. He just looked defeated throughout the whole game. He couldn't protect anybody. So as of right now, Trent Brown is not active right now. So we have to see in between now and Sunday. But as of right now, it's a no-go for him.
Gotcha. Yeah. So overall, the Browns, when we're just looking at their offense, it hasn't really changed much. Obviously, everyone still knows that the run game is the best part of this team. Regardless if we're looking at the offensive scheme or not, the Browns' ability to find success on the ground really has shown, who they are as a team. Now, over the last few weeks, it's kind of been miss and match of, is the run game going to break out? You look at the game that they had against the Steelers and the Colts, the run game was pretty much bottled up. Kareem Hunt did have 76 yards, last week, but we haven't had that marquee game that they had earlier in the season. When you look at when they had Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, Dearness Johnson obviously still has had some struggles, but typically that outside zone and that gap scheme that they have in their running game has been very good in terms of the foundation of that. But also they've been incorporating play action passing a lot in terms of their offense. You look at those bootleg and those rollout plays by Baker Mayfield. That's when he's really been able to find his success in this offense, is getting out of the pocket, and making a quick read, getting the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible, because he actually has been one of the longest quarterbacks or had the longest time to hold the ball in his hands as a quarterback in NFL. And that's something that you want to see him improve on. And again, just being more decisive in his decision-making is something that he's kind of struggled with. So if he can pick that up, and do that on a high level, I definitely feel like that's something that the offense can succeed in. And then looking at the defense, their scheme with Joe Woods at their defensive coordinator, he's kind of been hot and cold, where, some weeks his play calling is really good. Rather, he's mixing it up with defensive backs, blitzing out of the slot. That's something I've seen with some success. You look at Kevin Johnson, or sometimes it'll be like a safety like Sheldrick Redwine. He's been blitzing out of the slot, with some success getting to the quarterback, because the linebackers, it's not really a good enough group or have enough talent that you can, feel secure enough that you can blitz one of them and that they'll be able to make a play. And then also just being able to stop the run is something that they're trying to do on a more consistent basis. But their scheme is still, they're going to run that 4-down defensive lineman, play cover 3, and keep everything in front of them for the most part. And then it's just really dependent on how well does the secondary play. So far, they've struggled this season. And if they're really going to improve, it comes down to, how consistent can they be on the back end, because we know Myles Garrett and his potential to pretty much wreck any game at any time is something that they really rely on. And I would say almost too much. But, in terms of the defense, the Raiders have really struggled this season. What are they trying to do, or what are they trying to get out of that scheme over there in Oakland, or excuse me, Las Vegas?
Las Vegas. Honestly, you said it. The Raiders' defense has struggled badly, and I think a big thing with the Las Vegas Raiders and how their defense operates, I think they're a big time bend but don't break type of defense. Now, we all know Las Vegas gives up so many yards. They're 26 right now in yards given. That's the back half of the league, and we all know their secondary is absolutely horrible. I think they're 28th as far as giving up pass yards, and that's not going to get the job done. And we all know Paul Gunther, he likes to confuse quarterbacks, which you guys have seen in Cleveland a long time while he was there for the Cincinnati Bengals. He likes to confuse the quarterback. Unfortunately for the Raiders have not been able to get enough out of their front four, because they necessarily don't like to blitz too often, because they do like to stay back and, like you said, try. It's sort of like the Cleveland. They want to keep everything in front of them. They just haven't been doing a good job of that. So they have not been generating enough pressure out of Cleveland Farrell, Max Crosby, Maurice Hurst. They just have not been able to get to the quarterback. And for a quarterback, like you said, with Baker Mayfield, who does hold the ball for a really long time, this might be a good time for him to, actually have a lot of time, because have a lot of time to sit back there and think who's going to be open, because the fact that the Raiders pass rush is so bad, like this could be a good sign for the Browns offense. And it's just been, it has not been good for the Raiders defense. I don't know if it's bad play calling by Paul Gunther, or just the Raiders do not have enough talent on the defense, but it's not good. It's not good for them.
Yeah, so that's definitely something that I want the Browns to try to take advantage of, is that secondary. Overall, I would say the Cleveland Browns do have one of the better offensive lines in the league. Obviously, the health of J.C. Treader is something that they have to consistently monitor. He's been having some knee issues, but really the interior of the offensive line has been, at least for the Browns, has been one of their strong suits. And if they're able to keep pressure, out of the face of Baker Mayfield, because the thing that he struggled with really the most has been interior pressure. And what you really look at, overall the Raiders and their defensive line, their interior hasn't really provided a lot. No. You guys do play relatively decent on the interior in terms of the run game. So, that's something that, they'll have to be able to compensate for, but I believe they'll be able to find some success, at least on the outside with the tackles with Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin. But it'll definitely be a big game. And I would say for both defenses, obviously there's secondary questions on both sides. Yeah. So whichever secondary can, like you said, don't break, and whoever breaks first will probably be the team, that cost them the game, essentially. Because, I feel like both offenses have, firepower, and they can score, at a moment's notice, with the right play, obviously. But it really just comes down to, can the defense do enough to prevent the other team? Because most likely this is going to be a shootout, just because of the secondaries and how many questions there are. Right. Now, moving over to the matchups, what are some matchups do you feel like are important for the Raiders and for you guys to find success?
The big one that I have down is basically for the Raiders is the Raiders offensive line versus the Browns defensive line. And like you said, Myles Garrett is a game wrecker. He caused so much havoc in games, and now that the Raiders they have been going through a lot of injury problems. Richie Incognito has been on IR for a long time. Of course, Gabe Jackson, unfortunately, he was kicked out of the last game with that whole play with Ndamukong Suh, and us Raiders fans was going through it, because Ndamukong Suh is one of those dirty players, and Gabe Jackson did nothing to get him kicked out. So it will be good for him to come back. And of course, the problems with Trent Brown, and he hasn't been on the field this season. So they're trying to mix and match offensive linemen. And of course, so we bring it back. Denzel Good, who's been a pretty good backup. Sometimes he'll play well. Sometimes he'll get beat. He has trouble with those really strong guys who it's going to push him back to Derek Carr. And Derek Carr also has been one of those guys who has been holding the ball a little bit, who has held the ball kind of long. And he's utilizing his feet a little bit more this year, but it hasn't been to the point where he's really comfortable in doing it, which I hope that he does improve this year. And also Colton Miller, who's probably going to match up against Myles Garrett. He's okay. I'm not going to say he's a very good lineman who's going to stop Myles Garrett throughout the whole game, but I think he's consistent enough to at least slow him down a little bit. And I think Myles Garrett is going to have a big a big game. I think he is going to have a big game. So basically, I'd say if the Raiders' offensive alignment can do enough to protect Derek Carr and generate enough holes for Josh Jacobs to have a big game, I think it will be good for the Raiders who needs to score a lot of points, because that's basically how the Las Vegas wins their games. They have to outscore teams.
Right.
And so if the offensive alignment of the Raiders can do enough to protect Derek Carr, then I think it's going to be a good game.
Definitely. Yeah, one of the matchups for me this week that's important for the Browns, I would definitely say, is the receivers versus the Raiders secondary. And I necessarily wouldn't say one particular player of the Browns over a certain cornerback matchup this week. I just say the Browns receiver overall, because the biggest hole that they're missing on their offense now is Odell Beckham Jr.
Right.
And there's been a lot of talk in the media. Is Baker Mayfield and the Browns better with Odell Beckham not on the field? And I totally disagree. There's no way where you can have a top 10 player at that position and that person not make your team better. Now, I get that there's been some chemistry issues when it comes to Baker Mayfield and his ability to get the ball to Odell Beckham. But you look at his impact on the field, there's two things that really stand out when it comes to what Odell Beckham provided for the offense and what he did to opposing defenses. The first, when you look at what he does in terms of coverage, no matter it doesn't matter what team he's on. Obviously with the Giants, after a while, they just realized Eli couldn't throw the ball, so they just pretty much stacked the box.
Right.
And, they were limited because they couldn't run the ball with Saquon with 9 people in the box most of the time.
Right.
When you look at the Browns, those secondaries always have to rotate in some form or fashion toward the sides of the field that Odell Beckham was on. And that's, regardless if they're passing the ball or running the ball. And when he's on the field, when you have that safety that has to shade over, that leaves more opportunities for other receivers or tight ends to make plays, because he can get down the field and he can stretch it vertically, which we all know he can do. And he's that type of player, when he gets the ball in his hands, he always creates a play because of that, elite athleticism that he has. And one of the biggest plays that he had was against the Cowboys. There's no way that you can say that a player that took a reverse, which could have got blown up by Alex Smith if he makes that tackle.
Right.
He takes it 50 yards and pretty much ices the game. If it's not Odell Beckham getting that handoff, that player on the Browns isn't making that play. Jarvis is a great player, but he's not making, that 50-yard touchdown run and outrunning the rest of the Cowboys defense. And then also, when it comes to his impact when he's on the field, is their ability to run the ball. They're averaging 5.1 yards per carry when Odell Beckham Jr. is on the field, versus when he's not on the field, they're only averaging 3.9 yards per carry. So again, that's just showing his impact just pre-snap because of how the secondary has to line up. So, it's very important for one of these Browns receivers to step up. Rashard Higgins had a big game last week. He had over 100 yards, and Donovan Peoples-Jones had that game-winning touchdown. But if they're not able to, find consistent holes in the defense, or even just win one-on-one matchups against the Raiders, secondary, then that could become an issue, because we all know the Browns are going to run the ball. But if you can't throw it, that limits your volatility as an offense in order to score on a consistent basis.
Right.
So, in terms of the defense, what was a matchup that you felt that could be important for the Raiders this week?
Basically, I had a big deal with the defense, at mostly the secondary, and Baker Mayfield against that secondary. And like you said in the beginning of the show, where the Browns are including more play action passes, I think that's one of the weak points of the Las Vegas Raiders. Because if you watch the Las Vegas Raiders games, many times you can see the secondary out of position majority of the time, and that's going to happen a lot, because let's be honest, the Raiders secondary is a very young secondary, right? Trayvon Mullins is in his second season. Jonathan Abrams is his rookie year because he missed all of last year, and then LaMarcus Joyner, who's supposed to be the leader of that secondary, has not played up to par this year. And of course, we have Jeff Heath, who came over from the Cowboys, hasn't really been playing too well. I mean, he's been playing okay, but not as like he did in the Cowboys, and he was that anchor in the backfield. He hasn't been stepping up. And of course, we brought in Corey Littleton from the Los Angeles Rams, and for some reason he's not living up to that big contract that we did give to him this year. You can tell he's out of place a lot of times as well. So I see Baker Mayfield having a big game, keeping the Raiders secondary on their toes, because to be honest, I feel like Kareem Hunt is going to have a big game. And if Kareem Hunt is having that big game, they're overplaying the run. This leads to that play action pass. And Baker Mayfield, I think he's going to drop some dimes this Sunday. And so if the Raiders can do a good job limiting Baker Mayfield, who sometimes, does make questionable decisions, and that could be an advantage for the Raiders because they are aggressive. We all know Abrams is one of the most aggressive safeties in the game now, and he loves to hit people, but he's fast enough in coverage to, if he does get beat, he could make up ground. But I mean, if they're totally out of place, which I've seen a lot of times that the Raiders secondary has done, then they're going to be in trouble. So I expect Baker Mayfield to have a big game against the secondary, because I see a lot of open receivers in this game.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things too for me in terms of the Browns defense was I believe Derek Carr is actually going to find some success against the Browns secondary. And for me, I would say the biggest matchup is going to be Andrew Sendejo versus, honestly, I could say both Nelson Aguilar and Henry Ruggs. I was going to say more Ruggs just because, he has that elite speed, because he ran like a 4.2, I believe, 4.2 and some change, at the NFL Combine. And that's definitely something that the Browns secondary has struggled with the most is speed-based receivers in terms of their game. And obviously, Henry Ruggs, he's been on and off so far this season, but obviously he's still a rookie, so there's still some learning that he has to do. But overall, that speed really poses a danger for the Browns secondary just because they haven't been able to, on a consistent basis, make plays down the field when teams attack them vertically. And really, it's been Andrew Sendejo who's been that player that's consistently in the frame or slightly a step behind, or when he is there, he just doesn't make a good enough play on the ball. You've seen it against the Cowboys, you've seen it against the Colts, and can he really step up against a team that likes to attack vertically? I've seen the chemistry that Derek Carr has created with Nelson Aguilar. And if they're not able to make that play when the ball is in the air on that back end, it could be very dangerous in terms of this game getting out of hand quickly. And I don't expect it to be a blowout, but it's a lot more difficult to find, some success and really stick to your game plan when you're down by a couple of scores early in this game because of, say, a blown assignment or someone just not making a good play on the ball. So, it's really going to be big, for those secondaries. But I'm mostly looking at Andrew Sendejo because he's typically the furthest man on the field when it comes to teams attacking them vertically. So we're actually going to go ahead and go over into the team comparisons. And obviously, quarterback is the most important position when it comes down to this. So I'll actually go ahead and just take the quick lead on this. And looking at Baker Mayfield, so far this season, he's been on and off in what he can do in terms of being a consistent quarterback. There's some questions of, does he trust his eyes? Does he really read the play the way he's supposed to? When it comes to the defense, one of the things that he struggled with the Steelers was pre-snap movement. Players will line up at one area. They will move, post-snap where he think an area is going to be open, whether it be a zone or a player that's blitzing, and he'll make the wrong read. And he's not really a player to look off, a secondary player or a linebacker and then go to a different read. He's pretty much been that player that, okay, this is the person I'm looking for. If they're not open or I don't feel like I can make that throw in that window, then he'll go to his second option or third option if it's a check down. And one of the things that he really found success with last week against the Bengals is that once he knew what area of the field was going to be open, because, the Bengals really don't disguise things too much, he was quickly getting the ball out of his hands. And if he's able to do that, I believe he'll find more success I mean, he threw for 5 touchdowns last week, which was huge. And, you look right there, in the red zone, he has 13 touchdowns to no interceptions. And to me, I feel like that's the biggest part about Mayfield's game so far this season, is that he's making the smart play in the red zone and not turning the ball over. That was something that he did a lot last year, where he was throwing interceptions in the red zone. And that's an easy way to lose games, because pretty much once you're in the red zone, you're at least expecting to get 3 points in the situation that the kicker, makes the field goal, obviously, but that's just another step that you have to worry about. But once you, fumble the ball or throw an interception, that's points off the board. And then if you look at the other team scoring off that turnover, then you pretty much just had a 10-point swing where you just gave up 3 points and allowed the other team to score a touchdown. So I definitely believe this is going to be a big game for Mayfield in order him to continue to build that success. And then obviously heading into the bye week gives him some more time to figure out, this is what I've been doing wrong in the first 8 games. How do we fix this? And then that's going to be really incumbent on Kevin Stefanski and figuring out, what changes need to be made in terms of the offense.
Absolutely. So with Derek Carr this year has basically been putting up Carr-like numbers. Right now he has 1,726 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, which is very, very much Carr-like. He's done that last season. He's doing that again this year. He's doing an excellent job not turning the ball over, which is definitely helping out the Raiders offense score points, and also continuing drives, getting tough completions in third down situations, which has really been a strong suit for the Las Vegas Raiders. And with Derek Carr, I think I wouldn't say he's a game manager type of quarterback, but it's kind of getting to that point. And what I'm seeing more often this year is that they're opening the playbook a little bit more for Derek Carr. Now, it could be the acquisitions of Henry Ruggs and Nelson Aguilar, with those two being very speedy wide receivers. And now that they're moving the ball down a little bit more vertically, it's kind of helping Derek Carr, because as we've seen, him and Nelson Aguilar has been a great combination together, getting the ball down the field. Of course, with Henry Ruggs, they will try it every so often, trying to get him down vertically and to make a big play. And it's really been helping Derek Carr as a quarterback, because we all know here for Las Vegas, we all know Derek Carr as being called check down Carr. And we've seen that a lot of times. He would throw it to maybe Hunter Renfrow for maybe a 5-yard gain here, or check down to his running back for maybe a 2 or 3 yard pass. But when we really need 10 yards to get down the field. So the acquisitions with them two has been really helping Derek Carr this year, and it's really been good for that Raiders offense, who are scoring points. And of course, we have Darren Waller, who's involved into a top 3 tight end. I always thought it was Travis Kelce, George Kittle, and Darren Waller, the top 3 tight ends, in my opinion, in the NFL.
I definitely agree with that. Darren Waller is a very talented tight end.
Yes, absolutely. And he's just getting more confidence. Of course, he had a touchdown last week. And with him, they're spreading him out. They utilize him more than just the tight end. And also, the Raiders do sometimes use a heavy 2 tight end set, and they like to throw out of that, try to confuse defenses in short yardage situations. When you bring those 2 tight ends, you think run automatically, but they will pass it out of that formation. And Darren Waller is always picking on cornerbacks and safeties who cannot guard that man to save his life. And also, linebackers are too slow to pick him up as well. So he's a mismatch nightmare, and that's been helping Derek Carr as a quarterback as well. And he has weapons, and he has shown it this year with his completion percentage. And if we can just, get him a little bit more touchdowns, because we are here and Raiders fans know him for maybe having 1 touchdown, no interceptions, right? If we can get him to maybe 4 touchdowns a game, I think that will that will open up his game even more. But this year has been very good. He has not turned the ball over. He has made big throws when he needed to, and the Raiders are scoring points. So Derek Carr is having a great year.
What do you think is, in terms of Derek Carr's game, what has really changed the most in terms of, he had that Pro Bowl season back in 2016 where he was playing really good. He was actually in the MVP conversation for a little bit in terms of that season. What do you think has really been the biggest change in terms of what he was at that time when he made the Pro Bowl versus to pretty much what we expect out of Derek Carr now?
You know what? I think it's confidence. Because when he had that really gruesome injury before the playoffs, before they even made the playoffs games, I forgot which team they was playing. But when he had that injury, I think you can kind of tell Derek Carr's confidence was not there in between the last two seasons that they had, and of course the consistency in with coaching, because now John Gruden has been here for his third year. This confidence is building. He's learning the playbook, and now he's got it down to a T. And you can tell he's more comfortable with running that offense that John Gruden has put in place. And we all know John Gruden to be a quarterback guru. And you can see it coming out of Derek Carr with his completion percentage, and also making big time throws when he needs to make a big time throw. So just the confidence in the coaching staff and getting his body right and adding a little bit more talent to that offense has really been helping him over the past couple of years.
Definitely. So moving over to the running back group, for the Browns, obviously this has been something that has always been in discussion, is their ability to run the ball and run it with success. They're still looking at getting Nick Chubb back after the bye week, so about 2 weeks potentially for his return. And I believe Kareem Hunt has done a very, I would say, above serviceable job. He's been above average. Now, there's obviously been questions of, will the Browns find that explosive run game again without Nick Chubb, behind Kareem Hunt? And I wasn't expecting them to be this completely just overly dominant run game. One, because you had to look at the matchups. The Colts and the Steelers were two teams where, they've been stopping people from running the ball no matter who they've been playing. The Steelers are the number one run defense in the league right now. And then obviously the Colts, they're a top, I believe, 6 unit right now. And Kareem Hunt, he led the league in rushing his rookie year, but what he offers is versatility. And I definitely believe that's something that has, been a strong suit of his game. He can catch passes out of the backfield. And one thing that I've noticed, has been a consistent formation that they like to use, and it's typically in the red zone and on third in like short situations, like a 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4, is that they like to motion Kareem Hunt out of the backfield into an empty formation while Baker Mayfield's in the shotgun. And then he's really been able to either take advantage of a linebacker, or sometimes there's even been corners, that's been out there. But the fact that they're able to use him in that position where you can motion him out of backfield as another receiver and, have confidence in terms of what he can provide really just adds another dynamic in terms of, what they get out of that running back position. And then you look at D'Ernest Johnson, who's based, when you really think of the person that's replacing, Nick Chubb, is D'Ernest Johnson, because Kareem Hunt was already getting touches, when Nick Chubb was healthy. D'Ernest Johnson was that player that they wanted to, come in and be able to spell Kareem Hunt and provide some solid carries. But just overall, it's pretty much been feast or famine with D'Ernest Johnson. Either he has a big chunk of change when he runs the ball. You look against the Colts, pretty much his only good run of the game was that 28-yard run to seal the win. When you look at the Steelers, he pretty much didn't have any success. Last week, he only had a carry for 3 yards. Can he be a little bit more consistent in terms of running the ball? Because even if you're a backup, if you're only averaging maybe like 3.5 yards per carry, you're still help moving the chains. 1 or 2 yards per carry isn't really helping the offense when you're on the field. And pretty much when he's on the field, they really only run the ball. His ability to catch the ball out of the backfield hasn't really shown, much in the regular season. Now he did it, at a high efficiency during training camp, but you're going against the exact same players and the system that's being ran against you in practice. So, I look forward to, having Nick Chubb back, because of what he provides in terms of, being a consistent runner and being able to run the ball, 25 times, 30 times a game, because you have that two-headed monster and Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And they're missing that running prowess that Nick Chubb offers. But running the ball has obviously been an issue for the Raiders, and Josh Jacobs going through that sophomore slump. What has he really struggled with this season that we didn't really see last year, out of his rookie campaign?
Well, what I think is the biggest reason for his sophomore slump is he's not getting those big plays that we have known to see him do in his rookie year. And one of the examples I remember from last year was Chicago Bears. He was gashing that defensive line, who is strong. And of course, that again, it goes back to the offensive lineman not being consistent, because like I said in the beginning of the show, that the Raiders move as far as the offensive lines move. And unfortunately, since they have been injured, since they have been going through this COVID-19 issue, they haven't getting those large holes that we have seen in the past. It has really been struggling for Josh Jacobs, and to the point where they're giving more time to the backups. We've seen Devontae Booker come in a couple of games and really have, good games, getting maybe 5-6 carries a game, and then bring in Josh Jacobs for short yardage situations. But he's not getting those big 10, 15-yard runs, not even 8, not even picking up 8, getting them into short yardage situations that the Raiders were really good at last season. And it's been really hard for Josh Jacobs to find that consistency that he did find in his rookie year. Now, granted, he has been playing tough defenses as well. We all know the Buccaneers are strong as far as their defense. Kansas City, sometimes they can be hot and cold. He did find some success as far as running the ball, but yeah, it's been tough. The defense have been bottling them up. I think they're figuring out Josh Jacobs a little bit more, and of course the offensive lineman is trying to plug in just offensive lineman because of the injuries. Richie Incognito is a big key for that offensive lineman. Gabe Jackson is another big key. Trent Brown is another big key, but he hasn't played majority of the season. So it's really been hard for Josh Jacobs to really find those holes. And I think the only consistent thing we have on the offensive line is Rodney Hudson, who's been one of the best centers in the game for a long time. And that's the only person we could look to say, hey, try to work it out for the offensive lineman. But
right, open up some running lanes.
Yeah, but it hasn't been any running lanes, to be honest with you, for Josh Jacobs. But hopefully he can find his groove back for the rest of the year. But it's been hard finding running lanes for him.
Gotcha. Now, has Jalen Richard been able to, really cut out an identity on his offense? I know he's usually been considered like a third down, like pass catching back, but also like he's been able to run the ball with some success, over the past few years.
Yeah, Jalen Richard is definitely one of those players that, like you said, it's more of a receiving back. He did have some success in the Saints game, scoring a touchdown after he did have a pretty bad fumble in that game. But he did have some success getting a great rushing touchdown against that Saints defense. But they have been giving a little bit more time to Devontae Booker, who was their third string guy. He has been finding some success running the ball. He did with the Kansas City Chiefs, and he did play a little bit against Tampa Bay. It wasn't a whole lot, but I think I think the Raiders coaching staff is getting a little bit more confident in Devontae Booker than Jalen Richard. Which sucks because Jalen Richard did sign a contract this year to come back to obviously be that backup to Josh Jacobs, but they have been giving more time to Devontae Booker.
Gotcha. So moving over to the wide receiver group, obviously, again, we just talked about this. This is going to be, a big game for the Cleveland Browns and, what they can get out of the receiver group. You look at Rashard Higgins last week, had 6 receptions for 110 yards. Jarvis Landry, he hasn't had that big marquee game that we've all kind of been hoping for. He hasn't scored a touchdown this season, so hopefully he can find the end zone. But my biggest thing when it comes to Jarvis Landry is the fact that he's been able to fight through injury. He has that broken rib back that he suffered against the Colts, and then he's had the hip surgery, and he's just been that consistent player that the Browns really lacked for so long. And that was the thing that I really enjoyed the most about the signing of Jarvis Landry, is the fact that he finally gave the Browns some consistency. And once they made that trade, he really, I would say, almost immediately made his impact even before the season started. Because one, when you have that veteran person that can come in here, be a vocal leader, which I feel is very important, no matter what franchise you're with. Someone that's a vocal leader, but also backs it up with their play on the field, changes the culture of a team. And I really feel that's what Jarvis Landry offers the most. There will likely be some talks about what will the Browns do with Odell Beckham Jr. He's getting paid a lot of money. We know that, a torn ACL takes, different amounts of time to return from. Some players, like you look at Adrian Peterson, the man came back in 10 months, ran for over 2,000 yards, and pretty much changed, our expectations of players recovering from an ACL injury. But then you look at some players, it takes them, a year and a half, 2 years, sometimes even 3, like even just getting that confidence back. And it's a lot different when you look at receivers, because it's a lot of cutting. It's, and one, you're just putting a lot of pressure on your ligaments as well. And I mean, you look at MetLife Stadium and how garbage of a turf that's been, numerous players have gotten injured so far on that turf. And that's the thing that players are consistently worried about, cutting and, doing, any type of motion that puts a lot of stress on your knees is something, that most players are always kind of on the lookout for. And I believe one player that can definitely step up and make a big impact, this game potentially is Donovan Peoples-Jones. And, I'm not expecting him to come out and just be some world beater and score 4 touchdowns and, just completely just dominate the game. But there's 2 things that really stick out with Donovan Peoples-Jones. Is one, his ability to run block. He's currently the highest graded, run blocking receiver on the team. He grades at over a 75 run blocking grade, according to Pro Football Focus, which is huge because obviously if you're running the ball, you need receivers on the outside that can maintain blocks to help open up those run lanes, because we all know the Browns offensive line, does good in the run game, but those receivers are also important. And then 2, what he provides in terms of just stretching the field vertically on play action. He's not necessarily the fastest receiver, but he's a player that you can throw the ball down, down the field too, and he can catch those contested passes down the sideline outside the numbers. And that's really the player that Odell Beckham was, even though he's not the biggest guy, but his vertical and his athletic ability is what helped him be that dominant X receiver outside the numbers and really win those one-on-one matchups. So I believe Donovan Peoples-Jones and his impact this week is going to be important for the Browns in order for them to find some success. And then also, just Rashard Higgins being a consistent threat over the middle and in the intermediate parts of the field, which he's done throughout his career, developing that chemistry with Baker Mayfield. Now, looking at the Raiders, Nelson Aguilar, he's been one of those receivers where darn near whenever Derek Carr throws the ball to him, man, it's a catch down the field for a huge gain or a touchdown, and he leads the team in touchdown receptions with 4. How has his receiver group done so far this season?
It's been hot and cold. To be honest with you, Nelson Aguilar has been a big revelation for the Las Vegas Raiders because we all know him in Philadelphia, his past of being one of those wide receivers who's dropped many of footballs and really made a bad name for himself. And this year has been a big revelation for him. I think him and Derek Carr has really developed a chemistry that's really doing well for the team. And I see it continuing. I mean, they have found they have found really a good situation that he's got himself into, and it's really building his confidence. And now that his confidence is up, you can see the fruits of his labor and really helping the team as far as getting touchdowns and making big plays. And also, the speed of Henry Ruggs has also been helping him as well, because you have to worry about those two guys getting down the field vertically, and leaves a lot of one-on-one situations that Nelson Aguilar could probably take advantage of. So it's really been helping him. Henry Ruggs, as we all know, he was coming off of an injury, and now he's still trying to make his way into the league. It hurts when you haven't really been having a lot of playing time like he has, but he's come together. We've seen a couple of games where he has had big catches, and now they're starting to use him more in trick plays, really using his speed in different ways. So hopefully down the road we can see him grab more touchdowns and just develop a game for himself in the NFL, because we really don't know what Henry Ruggs has to offer as of right now. And of course, Hunter Renfrow, who's the prototypical slot receivers, who's going to be in the middle of the field, really make those tough catches that where we need a big play. He has delivered in some instance, and we are and he has to have more of a consistency, because some games he's like making a big impact. Some days he's just out there running for his health, I guess, and so if we can get him more consistent, I think that will be helpful. And of course, Darren Waller, who's just basically everywhere on the field, him lining up outside, and he can get down vertically as well. And of course, he can line up in the typical tight end position and make noise from there. So the wide receiver crew, I think it's fast. It's very fast. We all know what John Gruden likes to do, and I have seen this in the past couple of games. They like to bunch the receivers all together on one side of the field to really confuse the defense with that speed, because you never know who's going down there vertically, who's just going to go ahead and just take the short route, which is really scary for a lot of defenses, because you don't want to have Henry Ruggs or Nelson Aguilar down the field over a blown assignment when they have the receiver stacked in one side of the field. So John Gruden likes to play those those mind games, and really wants to utilize the speed of these receivers, and that's really have been helping the Raiders as far as them scoring points, because they have been putting up points this year. And Nelson Aguilar is the big key. He's going to have to have another big game this year, going out there in Cleveland. He has to show up, him and Henry Ruggs, because they really depend on those two to really have a big game if they're going to even be in this game. So the wide receiving core is a big deal.
So actually moving over to the tight end position, you already kind of brought up Darren Waller, and his impact is huge on pretty much any game that he plays on. And for me, obviously it was a big week for the Browns and the production they got out of their tight end group. And that was actually one of the position groups that I had as a big key to winning that game against the Bengals, was them finally getting some production out of the tight end group as a whole. Obviously it's nice when you have one or maybe two players that can provide you with something. With Austin Hooper being out because of that appendectomy, Harrison Bryant had more opportunities being that starting tight end, and boy, did he take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 2 touchdowns. David Njoku, he only had 3 targets, but he had a touchdown for 16 yards. We had that contested catch right over the middle. And this tight end group has kind of been either you're there making an impact or you're non-existent. I would pretty much say through about maybe the first 5 games of the season, you didn't really know what you were going to get out of this group. And, Austin Hooper was finally starting to come on. He had a decent game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he was just able to find some open spaces where they're able to throw the ball. Now, Obviously, it didn't lead into a lot of points. Just overall, the Steelers' defense had a better outing than the Browns' offense. But Austin Hooper was finally starting to build that chemistry with Baker Mayfield. Now you lose him, and you have to have someone step up at that tight end group. And then Harrison Bryant finally came in and was able to, have a big game. And, the better that Harrison Bryant is able to play on a weekly basis, even past his game with the Raiders, that only helps the Browns offense, because now you have another tight end alongside Austin Hooper, who you just paid a big money contract to for 4 years, where you're expecting him to make a big impact on this team. Now you have another player that the defense has to worry about with Bryant. Now, he traditionally plays more of an H-back type of role. So, instead of being that traditional inline wide tight end like Hooper, he's more of that move tight end that you want to get in the seam or get underneath the one-on-one coverage. You see him run a lot of stick routes or out routes into the flat, and that's where he really makes his biggest impact. And just getting in the end zone. These are tight ends or players that you want to target in the red zone. And the more plays that Harrison Bryant can make, I feel only the better it'll be for Baker Mayfield. Even when you look back his days in college with Mark Andrews, he liked to target the tight end in the intermediate parts of the field, because typically those are the players that can find really soft spots in the zone, and zone defenses are typically, what most teams run in the NFL. So if Bryant can continue to build upon that success and David Njoku just does enough, maybe he can become a trade piece. He did early in the season request a trade. Then he decided, I'm just going to focus on the team, mostly because he realized, I'm not going to get a lot of play time. And, what value do you really provide if you're not doing anything on the field? So maybe he has a big game this week, and then they can maximize his trade value, because, again, he wants to be a number one tight end, and that's going to be very difficult to do when you have Harrison Bryant, who's playing better and better each week as a rookie. And then obviously you're going to get Austin Hooper back after the bye week. So, potentially this is a week for David Njoku to grow that trade value for another team, if the Browns do decide to trade him for the trade deadline. Now, looking at the Raiders, obviously talked about Darren Waller. What have you guys got out of Jason Witten so far this season?
We all know Jason Witten wasn't really going to get as much playing time. I mean, he's in the back half of his Hall of Fame career. Mostly he's out there to block. I mean, let's be honest. Like I said, with those two tight end heavy sets, he comes in and he is going out there for routes, but they really don't look his way too often. He has had a touchdown this year, which was really nice to see. But we all know he's that veteran in the locker room to really, mold Darren Waller and to tell him all the knowledge that he's there, and to also block for Josh Jacobs in those short yardage situations. And also, Foster Moreau, our third string tight end, they'll bring him in. He's basically another guy that does try to come in to block, but he does have relatively good hands as well. He can catch the ball very well. So basically, those two guys, they're really, not getting as much playing time as they should. Of course, the Raiders really do not, utilize a lot of tight ends. I mean, when you have Darren Waller, why do you really need to? Because he's the man there. But Jason Witten will be there for a lot of goal line situations, a lot of short yardage situations. Bring him in. I mean, you really can't, put out the fact that he's caught a lot of red zone touchdowns, Jason Witten, in his lifetime. And, that skill just doesn't go away. I mean, how old you get. I mean, he still has that skill to get it done when it is down to those close yard red zone situations. And then Darren Waller, of course, they just put him everywhere, and they want him to have a big game. That's Derek Carr's favorite target by far. We have seen that in the past, especially against the Saints. That's his best game of the year. Over 100 yards, caught 12 catches, and that's his favorite target. And they're going to find a lot of mismatch, of course, against the Browns secondary, who's like you said, not the best. And we're gonna see if the linebackers can do anything to stop him. I don't know if that's the case. Darren Waller is such a good athlete that it's just he's a matchup nightmare, and he has to have a big game if the Raiders have any chance of winning Sunday.
Definitely. Yeah, so actually the linebackers was a group that we're going to talk about next, but we're just going to go on a quick commercial break. Again, the Cleveland Browns pregame tailgate show is sponsored by Focus Clothing CLE. Focus Clothing is a Black-owned clothing business based out of Cleveland, Ohio. Feel free to check them out. They do have a new collection out. Mark is actually a supporter of the brand as well over there in California. So again, you can check them out at Focus Clothing CLE, and this is one of their product launches.
Who said that t-shirt was only for the summer?
Again, that is Focus Clothing CLE. Feel free to check them out on social media, Facebook and Instagram. That's at Focus Clothing CLE. The CLE stands for Cleveland. And you can also follow them on Twitter at Focus CLE as well. So actually, we're going to go ahead and talk about the defensive line before we get into the linebackers. Looking at the defensive line for the Cleveland Browns, obviously the biggest one, Myles Garrett, who's been the game record. Definitely is going to be a defensive player of the year candidate, most likely going to be going up against probably Aaron Donald, as one of the players for defensive player of the year. I mean, just the impact that Aaron Donald has on a consistent week is just, it's almost mind blowing how good of a player he is. Definitely going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. So it'll be interesting to see how that race ends up going. But Myles Garrett, I definitely do believe is going to be in the lead for Defensive Player of the Year after just winning the AFC Defensive Player of the Month, which is huge. And, obviously that's a big step into winning that award. But moving along the defensive line, there's still some questions. The biggest question is opposite of Myles Garrett. And can Olivier Vernon or Adrian Claiborne finally step up and provide a consistent impact? Like at this point, I'm also probably sounding like a broken record that I'm always asking, will Olivier Vernon finally come up and make a play? Now, he's been good. You know what? I'm not even going to say good. He's been great in his run defense in terms of setting an edge and not allowing runs to get on the outside on his side of the field, which is something that you want from your, defensive lineman, because typically he's going to be on the same side as Sione Takitaki, who's one of the better run defending linebackers in the league. And that's, a big sediment on what Olivier Vernon is able to do at the defensive line. But just in terms of pass rush, since he's joined the team, he really hasn't been able to do much. Adrian Claiborne, they typically like to move him over to the inside and sub packages on passing downs. But again, they're just not giving enough. Because in a situation, obviously knock on wood, that Myles Garrett gets injured, there's going to be no pass rush. Mm-hmm. This defense has pretty much been Myles Garrett's impact and then Denzel Ward making a play in the secondary. Outside of that, you don't know what you're going to get out of this defense. The interior has played well. You look at Sheldon Richardson, what he's been able to do as a veteran defensive lineman. He's always been able to grade well in terms of run defense and being able to, shore up things in the interior, especially at that 3 technique, which was horrible before he joined. Obviously, the Browns went 0-16 and 1-15 before they signed him. Obviously, he's not the reason strictly of why they got better, but shoring up that run defense has been huge, and he's definitely been one of the reasons. And, of course, Larry Ogunjobi, who's one of the higher-graded run defensive tackles in the league, has been those two have been two of the big reasons of why this defensive line, has been a stronger unit. But, again, there's too many questions in terms of what they can do in terms of creating pressure and getting after the quarterback. One of the statistics that came up early in the show is that Derek Carr is one of the best pocket passers when he has a clean pocket in the NFL. He just hasn't had too many of them. And in the situation that they decide, you know what, we don't trust what the Browns have outside of Myles Garrett, we're going to double team him early and often. they're consistently going to have to chip him because that's one of the things that the Bengals had success with. And then if it's just, okay, we're going to expect Olivier Vernon or Adrian Claiborne to make a play, Derek Carr is going to have way too much time. And then this secondary for the Browns is really going to struggle. And if they can't find some consistent pressure and get after Derek Carr, this could be a long game for the defense. But, looking at, the Raiders defensive line, getting pressure has been an issue for them as well.
And that is it. I mean, it has been no pass rush, consistent pass rush, I should say, because like I said, in the Kansas City game in the last 2 weeks, they generated a lot of pass rush. They made Patrick Mahomes very uncomfortable in the pocket, where he did have to use his legs to get out of the pocket and try to throw it downfield, which didn't work because the secondary decided to have the game of their life that week against the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, not the game of their lives, the second half of their lives. And they generated a lot of pressure. Max Crosby was always in the backfield, hawking him, and managed to get a sack on Patrick Mahomes. Cleveland Farrell was able to get close to Patrick Mahomes and knock some balls down. And then we have Mo Hurst who's holding down the front, and also Hankins who's basically just there. He hasn't done much, to be honest with you. But then you turn around and you see Tom Brady last week just back there. He could read a book. He could make coffee. He could do whatever he wanted to do. He had all the time in the world, right? And Raiders fans is basically like, what's going on? Like, 1 week you're getting pressure, next week it's not good. And of course, for some reason, the run defense is always there. The run defense has been very consistent over the past couple of years. They've been consistent this year, which is a bright spot, which is a very bright spot. But when it comes down to pass rush, it has not worked out for the Las Vegas Raiders at all. And I just don't understand what it is. I mean, if we're too predictable, Paul Gunther has not really done anything spectacular to confuse the offensive linemen, or we just, don't have enough talent. And look, it could be a combination of both, but it has been a bad year for the Las Vegas Raiders. And they're in like the back half of sacks, which is embarrassing, and they have been for a long time, which is embarrassing. So they have to step up their game and really generate pressure and make Baker Mayfield uncomfortable on Sunday.
Yeah, if the Raiders are able to get pressure on Mayfield, quickly, that's really been the area that he's been able. Well, I shouldn't necessarily been able. That's been the area of his game where he's made the most mistakes, is when there's quick initial pressure. He kind of gets antsy in the pocket and he gets that happy feet where he's kind of bouncing rather than being solid and planted with, a solid foundation, then throwing the ball. So, if they're able to get some pressure on her, that could impact, the Browns' ability to throw the ball with some consistency. But again, it comes down to the Raiders being able to get some pass rush on him in the first place. Now, moving over to the linebackers, as we start to wrap up this defense, I'm actually quite surprised with how the Browns have been able to improve in terms of their linebacker play. Early on in the season, simply put, the linebacker core was not good. They were missing Mac Wilson, so a lot of coverage issues. You look at Sione Takitaki. Overall, he's a coverage liability, but he plays extremely well in terms of run defense. He's actually in the top 10 of all run defending linebackers in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus, when he's on the field, being able to set the edge, and really just his impact of making plays in the run game has been huge. And that's one of the things that they talked about when he came out of BYU, was his ability to play well in the run game. Then you look at Malcolm Smith, another player where he doesn't, overly excel in run defense, but he does very good in coverage, covering tight ends, covering receivers out of the slot. And he's quietly been one of the better linebackers in the NFL and also on this Browns team. And then you look at BJ Goodson, a player that they signed in free agency from the Packers. He's the captain of that defense, calling out plays, making sure that people are lining up correctly. And he's been getting better on a weekly basis. Now, his Pro Football Focus grades may not show that he's the greatest linebacker in the world, but he's been able to improve in coverage, covering the deep middle of the field, covering tight ends, making plays in the run game. He's been improving on a week in and week out basis. Now, early in the season, he played so poorly that's been impacting his overall grade, but on a weekly basis, you've been seeing him get better, making plays and running sideline to sideline and being that linebacker that the Browns need. Now, on the flip side, looking at the Raiders, your guys as linebackers, you sign Corey Littleton to some money. You sign Nick Kwiatkowski. How do you pronounce it?
Kwiatkowski.
Nick Wazowski. No, just kidding. Mike Wazowski. But when you look at what he does, he's definitely been that best linebacker for them, but obviously he's been struggling with his health, not playing in weeks 2 and week 3, and then coming back last week, finally getting healthy. And then, like I said, Corey Littleton, just simply put, hasn't been playing well at all this season.
No, and it's really been putting the Raiders defense back, because we all expected Corey Littleton to come in and really cover tight ends, which has been abysmal for the Las Vegas Raiders in the past seasons. We have seen tight ends have big games against them many of times, and it for some reason it hasn't changed this year, because we've seen Rob Gronkowski have a pretty crazy game last week. And so I don't know what has become of Corey Littleton coming over from the Los Angeles Rams. He just looks like a different player, and he has not been where he needed to be on the field. It's been a lot of blown assignments. Well, we have seen receivers and tight ends like uncovered for like 10 or 15 yards. And that is embarrassing. Like I was watching the game last week, and the Raiders it was a 24-20 game, and the Raiders had a 3rd and long. I think it was a 3rd and 12. And it was like a check down to, I think it was Ronald Jones or Leonard Fournette. I can't remember. And they gained like 13 yards where they needed a big stop. Nobody was there. And I'm like, so what are our linebackers are doing? I have no idea what they are doing. Like you said, Nick Kwiatkowski coming from the Chicago Bears. He has been consistent, especially in the run game. He's been able to really give them a good, decent amount of plays in the run game that was really helping with the run game. But the pass game, he still has a little bit more to show. And of course, Nicholas Morrow, who's been on the team for a long time, has not really played that well. And unfortunately, he's like one of those guys where he's just kind of out there. And it's like he's not where he needs to be majority of the time. And it really has hurt as far as him being on the field, which I thought was a big necessary need that the Raiders needed. They need an upgrade from Nicholas Morrow. I'm sorry, I hate to say it. He's not really that good of a linebacker, unfortunately. And so the linebackers, they have to step up their game. They have to step up their game. And like you said, the tight end groups of the Cleveland Browns had a big game. They're going to be confident going into this game, knowing, hey, we're playing against the Raiders. These guys are really not that good. So they might have another big game. And look, the Raiders really need to step up their the linebacker play all in all, and they have to figure it out in a quick manner if they want to make a playoff push.
Right. And speaking of figuring out, one of the groups that definitely has to do this on both teams is the secondary. Looking at the Browns and their defensive group, overall, the Browns secondary is still trying to find their footing. You look at Denzel Ward, who's been arguably, I'm not even going to say arguably. He's been the best player on the defense next to Myles Garrett. And arguably, those two players are really the defense. Like I said, the linebacking core has played better, but Denzel Ward's been that player that's been making a big time play when it's needed. Just simple things of just breaking up a pass in the end zone. Because if he's just one step behind or misplays the ball, it's a touchdown. Generally in the NFL, if a defensive back doesn't make a good play on the ball. Then you look at Terrence Mitchell, he's been, and at this point, you really can't even say filling in because Greedy Williams has been on IR and he didn't play, heading into the season before they officially placed him on injury reserve. And again, he's just another savvy veteran where you don't expect, the world from him, but he's going to give you solid snaps. He's someone that can make plays on the ball. Make some solid tackles, especially, against running backs in the run game is something that he does play well in terms of run support from that cornerback position. And then you look at the safeties, Carl Joseph, the former Raider, he's coming back from the hamstring injury, and you're not really sure of what exactly you're going to get from him because he's been so inconsistent this season, in terms of coverage. He's been playing better as a box safety in terms of run support. But you look at what Ronnie Harrison has done so far in the few games that he's actually been playing after getting traded from Jacksonville, and he's been the better safety of the two. Now, will Joe Woods decide to start Harrison with Carl Joseph being healthy? That remains to be seen. But when they're both on the field, Ronnie Harrison has been the better player. And then obviously the biggest question mark in this whole secondary on the third level is Andrew Sendejo. It doesn't matter how big of a fan of football you are. You might break down every single play. You might just watch YouTube highlights, or you just watch the game, as a regular bystander. I've seen people on a consistent basis say, why is it number 23, the player on the screen, when the other team makes a big play, has a big run, scores a touchdown? How long before you say, you know what, Andrew Sendejo isn't the player that we need on the back end that we can trust to make those plays? And, like I said earlier in the show before we started, maybe they decide to go get out and get a safety. Anthony Harris from the Vikings or Clinton Dix. Someone other than Andrew Sendejo. You can't wear 23 in Cleveland and not play well. LeBron already set that standard high when you wearing the number 23. Now it's just like, if you're wearing 23 in Cleveland, you're the most hated man in all of the land. When is Andrew Sendejo going to step up? That's the thing I'm still waiting for. If I have to trust Andrew Sendejo to make a play to win the game, it's tough. I'm having nightmares if I have to count on Andrew Sendejo to make a game-winning play, if it comes down to the wire in this game.
Right. And so with the Las Vegas Raiders secondary, it's basically the same thing with Cleveland Brown. The Cleveland Browns secondary is not really that good at all. One of the bright spots on the secondary is obviously Trayvon Mullen. He's been really excelling in his second year, and a lot of people don't throw his way because he's really playing a really tight coverage on a lot of these receivers, and so he has been one of the bright spots on that Raiders defense. And also with Jonathan Abrams, he did not play last week, of course, with COVID issues. So it's going to be a big help that he's coming back for that secondary, coming back this game. And we all know Jonathan Abrams is basically another version of Carl Joseph, I think, in Las Vegas. Is one of those guys who's all over the field. He wants to hit people and hit them hard. But sometimes he's too over aggressive sometimes, and he will miss a lot of tackles, which has been putting him in bad situations a lot of times. And so if he can get that together, he just plays within himself, and doesn't have to be overly aggressive like all the time, because he plays at one speed, and that's fast all the time. And it gets him in a lot of bad situations. We've seen him with the injury when he ran into the TV camera stands. That he was going full on wild. But he has a lot of passion. Don't get me wrong, and that's just who he is. But if he can go over there, he just have a consistent game, can be able to stop Kareem Hunt in the run game, and also make plays in the passing games, which is he still needs to figure it out. a little bit, but once he does figure it out, I think he will be one of the best safeties in the game. And then we have LaMarcus Joyner, who's supposed to be a captain of the team, but he gets burnt every single play he gets. I mean, it's just always an issue with LaMarcus Joyner. I mean, he gets burnt so much. It's like embarrassing. And he's one of the captains of the team. And I'm like, how is that possible? Because he's not been playing very well this year. A lot of times he hasn't been where he needs to be, especially when they do go into that zone defense. He's always in a bad position to where, these receivers are picking up big chunks of yards on him. And then, of course, Eric Harris, who you never know what you get from him week by week. One week he's a consistent great safety. He's playing well in passing coverage. Then the next week he's just nowhere to be found. And Eric Harris is, one of those feel-good stories. He had to really work to get where he needed to get to. He's another captain of our defense. And, his play does need to step up. But you never know. You never know. It's a week-by-week basis with him. And, Jeff Heath is there on the backup for Eric Harris. And, of course, we have Isaiah Johnson and Robertson, who's a rookie, who had to throw him in the fire pretty quickly because he has to have some playing time. LaMarcus Joyner has had issue with his health, but he has been able to stay on the field. But, when the starters is getting burned and then the backups is not really that well, like I said, the secondary is very young, so they have a lot of growing pains to do, but they need to step up their game.
Definitely. So that actually wraps up our comparisons for both teams. We're going to get into our last segment of the show. And, I'll let you go first, Mark. What are your 3 keys to the Raiders to win this game?
Okay, so I have my 3 keys is for the first one, I have getting Josh Jacobs more involved in the offensive game plan. We have seen him struggle in the past in this season, and if we can get him picking up those good yardage, like 7-8 yards, getting us in a lot of short down situations, that's going to help the offense tremendously. And so if we can get him going, then I think that's going to be a big help for the Raiders offense. Number 2, I have how well does the offensive line protect Derek Carr? Derek Carr, like you said, is one of the best pocket passers. He's very comfortable in the pocket. But when you do get him rattled a little bit, he does hold on to the ball, and I don't think he's really confident in using his legs. He has gotten out the pocket a little bit, but it hasn't been a lot. And he will sit there, he will hold the ball, try to find somebody open down the field, and when those receivers are covered, he'll sit there and take a sack. So the offensive lineman has to step up their game. They're getting Gabe Jackson back. He's a big help. Trent Brown, like I said, he might be out. Richard Incognito's not going to be there, so Denzel Good's going to have to step up. If Sam Young plays, he has to step up his game because he got beat. He looked so defeated. It was so sad. I was hurt for him. And so the offensive line has to do well against this defensive line who's going to be full go. I think they're going to have a good game. So they have to protect him, Derek Carr. And number 3, and I don't think it's a surprise to anybody, can the defense stop anybody? I'm just going to be 100% honest, man. When you give up, I think the Raiders have gave up at least 30 points in each and every game they played. And you give up 45 to Tampa Bay, that's not going to get the job done. So, like I said, if you're in a shootout and with the Cleveland Browns, if you can make those big plays that's going to get your defense off the field, like a third and long play, which the Raiders for some reason love to give up third and long plays in a tight game, and to the point where they come down to score because they can't get off the field on third down. So if the defense can't stop anybody, then look, it's going to be a long game for the Raiders.
Gotcha. Yeah, I definitely agree with one of your keys, especially with getting Josh Jacobs involved. That's really where they found a lot of their success last year when they were winning games, was Josh Jacobs and him finding success on the ground. So looking at my 3 keys for the Cleveland Browns, number 1, it's going to be the tight end group. Can they have a solid game of production in both facets of or both facets of the game? That's both in run blocking and catching the ball. Obviously, if they're able to set the edge, that increases the chances that Kareem Hunt is going to have a big game on the ground. And then also just being able to catch the ball, whether it be on 3rd and short or in the intermediate middle parts of the field. Can they make those plays? They showed last week that they can do it, but if you only do it once out of a 16-game season, then obviously the tight end group is still, a question mark. We're going to have Austin Hooper come back soon. Will Harrison Bryant continue to grow, and then potentially can you get some trade value out of David Njoku if they want to move on from him at the trade deadline? Number 2, the secondary. Limiting plays vertically down the field is going to be huge, especially against this Raiders offense. Like you said, throughout the show, they've shown the ability to score points. And Nelson Aguilar, Henry Ruggs, those are 2 very fast receivers that can get down the field potentially. But if they get Brian Edwards to play, that's another receiver that can stretch the field vertically. They have to be able to make plays on the 3rd level, and that has to be players outside of Denzel Ward. Terrence Mitchell, Carl Joseph if he plays, Andrew Sendejo. Being able to stop players vertically and down the field is going to be huge in order to make the Raiders march down the field and have long drives, which is something that they haven't shown a consistent ability to do so far this season. And then lastly, getting the run game on track. Last week they had a decent game. Kareem Hunt had 76 yards, but they still haven't had that 100-yard outing that they're looking for. And I feel that this is going to be a good week. If they're able to get the run game going early and throughout the game, that gives you momentum heading into the bye week, and then getting Nick Chubb back, knowing this is where we found success with Kareem Hunt. We'll use that to attack and approach the offense. And then obviously you're going to have to, lean in Nick Chubb into the game. You're just not just going to give him 30 carries. You have to warm him back up after not playing for 6 weeks. If they can get the run game going this week, you're going to most likely get Wyatt Teller back at their right guard position. So, as you get more players back along the offensive line and Nick Chubb, it helps the run game later in the season. Because as you talked about, this is a game that most likely can have playoff implications for the team that wins this game. Say in the situation that the Browns finish 9-7 and the Raiders finish 9-7. This game, whoever wins, could be that determining factor of who gets that 7th seed in the AFC for that wild card spot, having an extra playoff role. So hopefully the Browns are able to find some consistency, and I do expect it to most likely be a shootout. If you want, what's your score prediction for the game, Mark?
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and say this is going to be a 27-24 game. 27-24 game. I want to say Raiders, but it's tough, man. They gotta show more for me. So it could be a game that Cleveland can win. I'm a realist. I'm a Raiders fan, but I'm also a realist. They have to show more from me. So I say 27-24 Cleveland, to be honest with you.
All right. So for me, I actually have a little bit higher. I have it for 35-31. So, hopefully the Browns can find some consistency this week. I still don't believe the secondary is really good enough to stop this offense on a consistent basis. Potentially they'll figure out something to slow down Myles Garrett. He's been pretty much the only player on the Browns defensive line to create some pressure so far this season. So, if they double team him in some form or fashion, I definitely see the Raiders putting up some points. But I just think the Browns just have a little bit more talent on the offensive side of the ball, and just a better offensive line that helped them put up just slightly more points than the Raiders this week. So I have them for 35-31. Mark, again, I want to thank you so much for joining me on the show. If you want to shout out your social media information, if people want to give you a follow or let them know about the podcast that you host.
Yeah, absolutely. I host a podcast called SN Sports Talk with Mark every Friday from noon to 1 Pacific Standard Time. And it's on my YouTube. I have to change my name, so it's probably under my name. But if you do type in SN Sports Talk, actually on Google, you can find it will actually lead you to my to my YouTube page, so you can go ahead and do that. And like I said, I'm on every Friday from noon to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I want to thank you for having me on the show, Sean, and I appreciate this.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much for joining me. And again, the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is brought to you by Sports Illustrated BrownsDigest. Make sure you guys go over and check out the website. That's at www.si.com/NFL/Browns. Thank you guys so much for joining both of us, myself and Mark, for the special edition of the Cleveland Browns pregame tailgate show on a Thursday evening. So I know a lot of you guys are probably out there enjoying Thursday night football. So we're going to join you out there virtually from the couch. Go ahead and watch that game. And we'll see you guys next week. Well, actually, sorry, not next week, because there won't be a game for the Cleveland Browns. So we'll catch you in 2 weeks when the Browns come back. And thank you again, Mark, for